to support King Me.
King Me.
King Me.
Of all the speeches King delivered, none has stood the test of time like his famous I Have a Dream speech. Symbolically delivered from the steps of the Lincoln Memorial in 1963, in front of 250,000 people, both black and white.
But in the last year of his life, you should read Tavis Smiley's book on the death of a king. And the preachers turned on Doc. Wait now. See, some of you are angry with me, thinking I'm trying to steal Dr. King's legacy. Hell no. Don't put that on me, and don't let the white man put that on you so you could put that on me. I'm raising Dr. King because it is wrong for you to think that that man died because he had a dream. That man was a revolutionary thinker in the last days of his life. Some of his inner circle turned on him. They didn't agree with him talking against the war in Vietnam. He was hurting that his own staff, some of them disagreed with him. Then churches denied him. They didn't want him in their pulpit. Now it's easy to put his picture up and talk that crap about how you love him. You a damn liar if you loved him. I want you to listen. If you loved him, why did you let the writers of history write him down as a dreamer and pacify you with all these streets and boulevards named after him? But if you read his life, in the last 2 years of his life, he met with my teacher. They had a beautiful discussion, February 66. I don't know what they talked about, but I know my teacher. He loved Dr. King, but he showed him prophecy. He showed him where we are to separate from this enemy and not be integrated into him as Moses didn't integrate the children of Israel into Pharaoh. So in that last night, when he said, I want to get the language straight tonight, he stopped talking Negro and began talking black.
What did you discuss back in the hotel room?
Nothing, just friends, just like Khrushchev and Kennedy and everybody. When the people, all of the politicians of all other white races come together, and they, although they believe different, they think different, whites can come together and discuss the common cause. But whenever a few of us come together, the world is shook up. And I say, whatever went back there is our business.
Reverend King, do you agree?
Oh, yes, yes. We had a very good discussion on many matters. And of course, these are not things that we would discuss here, but we do have common problems and common concerns. And above all, as Muhammad Ali has just said, we are all victims of the same system of oppression. And even though we may have different religious beliefs, this does not at all
That's
bring
right.
about a difference in
Still
terms of
brothers.
our concern.
Still brothers.
Do you share the same, one more question, do you share the same concern that Muhammad has for his draft status?
Oh, I certainly do. My views on the draft are very clear. I'm against it. And I think the sooner our country does away with the draft, the better it will be for everybody. I'm very disturbed about the militaristic posture of our nation. And I think until we have a radical reorder going more and more to the depths and, I should say, to the doom that follows arrogance of power, as Senator Fulbright said.
He even agreed that separation might be better for us for a while. Like a people sick or diseased, you take them out of the public and you heal them. And then you send them back to the world. I didn't know these were things that Dr. King was saying. And when I read it, I said, this man, you must know the reality of Dr. King. He's more than a dreamer. And don't you let them throw the dream speech on you from '63. Let them play for you the speech that he made in New York City when he condemned the hypocrisy of the Johnson government that's fighting a war in Vietnam against poor people there and practicing violence, then want Dr. King to preach nonviolence to us while they're training you to kill people that never did nothing to you overseas.
Ladies and gentlemen, I need not pause to say how very delighted I am to be here tonight, and how very delighted I am to see you expressing your concern about the issues that will be discussed tonight by turning out in such large numbers. I also want to say that I consider it a great honor to share this program with Dr. Bennett, Dr. Comminger, and Rabbi Heschel, some of the distinguished leaders and personalities of our nation. And of course, it's always good to come back to Riverside Church. Over the last 8 years, I have had the privilege of preaching here almost every year in that period. And it is always a rich and rewarding experience to come to this great church and this great pulpit. I come to this magnificent house of worship tonight because my conscience leaves me no other choice. I join you in this meeting because I'm in deepest agreement with the aims and work of the organization which has brought us together, clergy and laymen concerned about Vietnam. The recent statements of your executive committee are the sentiments of my own heart, and I found myself in full accord when I read its opening lines. A time comes when silence is betrayal, and that time has come for us in relation to Vietnam. Violence is self-defeating. He who lives by the sword will perish by the sword.
You know, when you construct a man as a great man, there's nothing almost more satisfying than also seeing him as the opposite.
When the National Archives puts government documents up on the web, one has to confront them.
Tapes from the hotel rooms, FBI reports, those are pieces of information that we shouldn't have. The FBI was most alarmed about King because of his success.
He realized how sick this country was. We were trying to reveal the truth about segregation.
J. Edgar Hoover is famous for saying that he feared the rise of a black messiah.
The FBI says it's clear Martin Luther King Jr. is the most dangerous Negro in America, and we have to use every resource at our disposal to destroy him.
J. Edgar Hoover was the head of the FBI for 48 years.
The FBI's focus was collecting salacious sexual material of King with various girlfriends.
Hoover had made the speech that Martin Luther King was the world's most notorious liar.
Now, what am I going to do about Martin Luther King? It looks to me like he's too far gone.
This was a way that they could bring down a very influential black civil rights leader and contain the movement.
The FBI mailed a tape of Dr. King with other women to him and to Coretta with an advice that he should go kill himself.
The greatness of America is the right to protest far right.
Staying calm under fire is very hard when people are trying to kill you.
Anybody who was to the left of mainstream in civil rights was deemed a subversive.
They use surveillance in order to
Foment violence.
break apart these organizations.
They were running a surveillance state.
This represents the darkest part of the Bureau's history.
Street, Civil Rights, King, Van Oker, roll 20, sound 36.
Dr. King, this church is as good a place as any to go back over your commitment to the civil rights movement. Do you think white people in this country, and I'm talking about non-segregationists, people devoid or thinking they're devoid of racism, do you have any idea of what they want the Negro to be in America?
Well, it depends on the level that we are talking here, because I think you have to make a distinction between the people who are genuinely and absolutely committed in the white community on the question of racial equality. And I must confess that I think they're in a very small minority. I think the vast majority of white Americans will go but so far. It's a kind of installment plan for equality, and they are always looking for an excuse to go but so far.
Why are they looking for the excuse? What is it about the Negro? I mean, every other group that came as an immigrant somehow, not easily, but somehow got around it. Is it just the fact that Negroes are black?
That's a part of it, and that grows out of something else. You can't thingify anything without depersonalizing that something. If you use something as a means to an end, at that moment you make it a thing and you depersonalize it. The fact is that the Negro was a slave in this country for 244 years. That was a willful thing that was done. The Negro was brought here in chains, treated in very inhuman fashion, and this led to the thingification of the Negro. So he was not looked upon as a person. He was not looked upon as a human being with the same status and worth as other human beings. And the other thing is that human beings cannot continue to do wrong without eventually rationalizing that wrong. So slavery was justified morally, biologically, theoretically, scientifically, everything else. And it seems to me that white America must see that no other ethnic group has been a slave on American soil. That is one thing that other immigrant groups haven't had to face. The other thing is that the color became a stigma. American society made the Negro's color a stigma, and that can never be overlooked. So I think these things are absolutely necessary. The other thing is that America freed the slaves in 1863 through the Emancipation Proclamation of Abraham Lincoln, but gave the slaves no land or nothing in reality, and as a matter of fact, to get started on. At the same time, America was giving away millions of acres of land in the West and the Midwest, which meant that there was a willingness to give the white peasants from Europe an economic base. And yet it refused to give its black peasants from Africa, who came here involuntarily in chains and had worked free for 244 years, any kind of economic base. And so emancipation for the Negro was really freedom to hunger. It was freedom to the winds and rains of heaven. It was freedom without food to eat or land to cultivate, and therefore it was freedom and famine at the same time. And when white Americans tell the Negro to lift himself by his own bootstraps, they don't look over the legacy of slavery and segregation. I believe we ought to do all we can and seek to lift ourselves by our own bootstraps, but it's a cruel jest to say to a bootless man that he ought to lift himself by his own bootstraps. And many Negroes, by the thousands and millions, have been left bootless as a result of all of these years of oppression and as a result of a society that deliberately made his color a stigma and something worthless and degrading.
At the very same time that America refused to give the Negro any land, through an act of Congress, our government was giving away millions of acres of land in the West and the Midwest, which meant that it was willing to undergird its white peasants from Europe with an economic floor. But not only did they give the land, they built land-grant colleges with government money to teach them how to farm. Not only that, they provided county agents to further their expertise in farming. Not only that, they provided low interest rates in order that they could mechanize their farms. Not only that, today many of these people are receiving millions of dollars in federal subsidies not to farm, and they are the very people telling the black man that he ought to lift himself by his own bootstraps. Now, this is what we are faced with, and this is the reality. Now, when we come to Washington in this campaign, we are coming to get our check.
This is what we have to do. Now, the other thing we'll have to do is this. Always anchor our external direct action with the power of economic withdrawal. Now, we are poor people. Individually, we are poor when you compare us with white society in America. We are poor. Never stop, forget that collectively, that means all of us together, collectively we are richer than all the nations in the world with the exception of 9. Did you ever think about that? After you leave the United States, Soviet Russia, Great Britain, West Germany, France, and I can name others, the American Negro collectively is richer than most nations of the world. We have an annual income of more than $30 billion a year, which is more than all of the exports of the United States and more than the national budget of Canada. Did you know that? That's power right there if we know how to pool it. We don't have to argue with anybody
We don't have to curse and go around acting bad with our words. We don't need any bricks and bottles. We don't need any Molotov cocktails. We just need to go around to these stores and to these massive industries in our country and say, God sent us by here to say to you that you're not treating his children right. And we come by here to ask you to make the first item on your agenda fair treatment where God's children are concerned. Now, if you are not prepared to do that, we do have an agenda that we must follow. And our agenda calls for withdrawing economic support from you. So as a result of this, we're asking you tonight to go out and tell your neighbors not to buy Coca-Cola in Memphis. Go by and tell them not to buy Seal Test milk. Tell them not to buy, what is the other bread? Wonder Bread. And what is the other bread, come to Jesse? Tell them not to buy Hart's bread. As Jesse Jackson has said, up to now, only the garbage men have been feeling pain. Now we must kind of redistribute the pain. We are choosing these companies because they have been fair in their hiring policies, and we are choosing them because they can begin the process of saying they are going to support the needs and the rights of these men who are on strike. And then they can move on downtown and tell Mayor Loeb to do what is right.
We have information that King has been shot at the Lorraine. Back 10, he has been shot.
Okay, TAC 10 advising King has been shot, 604.
TAC 11, you want us to pull down?
Check TAC 11 pull down.
Okay, TAC 11. In the area?
A signal Q.
King has been shot.
All TAC units on the call, you are to form a ring around the Lorraine Hotel. You're to form a ring around the Lorraine Hotel. No one is to enter or leave.
Back here, we have information that the shot came from a brick building directly east across, west from the Lorraine.
Okay, TAC 10 has information. The shot was fired from a brick building directly across from the Lorraine on the east side, directly across from the Lorraine on the east side from a brick building, 606.
All units, that's all units, 150 advising all TAC units to seal this area off completely.
Gray overcast day here in Memphis as thousands of the city's Negroes gather to march in the interrupted sanitation men's demonstration.
Leading the procession, the widow of the late Dr. Martin Luther King and her 3 children. The Reverend Ralph Abernathy, Dr. King's successor, Harry Belafonte, United Auto Workers President Walter Reuther, and other union leaders. A number of marches previously estimated between 8 to 15,000 by various sources may be closer to 30 or 40,000.
Local police have devised the tightest security measures ever imposed on the city. Off they step now, black and white, out here today because the leader had a dream they intend to make real.
You got mama in the church. That's the kind of conversation we had until about 5:45 or so. We walked on the balcony. Ralph was still in the room. I picked out his tie. Ralph washed a shirt for him too, a drip dryer in those days, and he couldn't button it. So Ralph said, "You're not gonna wear that shirt?" He said, "I can't button it." He said, "You know when I wash another shirt for you." So Martin held out ties. I picked one of the ties, and we were dressing and talking the whole time. Stepped out on that balcony. We're up on that level. Everybody's down in the courtyard. And he saw Jesse. He said, "Jesse, don't take that whole band to Billy's house." He said, "I'm not taking the band." He said, "Plus, you are not dressed for dinner." He said, "I don't need no shirt and tie. I got an appetite." Jesse was smart even then. He said, "Well, I want you to meet the band leaders from Memphis, meet Ben Branch." So they started walking. I think Chauncey Eskridge, his lawyer, was going to come to dinner. Andy was coming to dinner. But Ben Branch and Jesse started walking towards the balcony where we were. At that point, Ralph was in the room and Martin and I were standing outside. And he saw somebody else. "Hello, how you doing? See you at the rally tonight." Stuff like that. Jesse was coming to the balcony where Martin was leaning over the railing talking to Jesse, meeting Ben Branch. I said, "Guys, we have a rally tonight. Let's go." I got about 5 or 6 steps and the shot rang out. People were ducking. I looked back and saw that he had been knocked off the railing back onto the balcony. I rushed to his side. There was this tremendous hole in the right side of his face. There was a bigger wound under his shirt that I could not see. The bullet's called a dum-dum. It doesn't go in straight. As it goes through the barrel of the gun, it heats up, and when it comes out, it mushrooms. So it tore all of his chest out under his shirt. And then I ran in the room.
I was at the trial in Memphis. I want to show you all quickly, explain to you why that jury of 6 blacks and 6 whites after 3 hours came back and found that white boy guilty of conspiring to kill Dr. Martin Luther King. And they went further than that. They also said there was some co-conspirators, black folks, unnamed, that was involved. I want to show you a little 3-minute clip of the minister that Dr. King was going by his house for dinner. He was due at 7, but they had to move it up because 7 would be a little too dark to shoot somebody. So they moved it to 6 o'clock. 2 years ago at a press conference in Memphis, I get a call. And they said, so-and-so is thinking about killing so-and-so, so-and-so. I said, what? I said, well, he said something at a press conference. I said, put him on the phone. I said, whatever you do, get that film. Because once NBC realized what this brother had slipped and said, we will never get our hands on the film. What you're fixing to see now went into the evidence in the King trial where they brought a wrongful death suit, and I'll explain that to you quickly in a minute. But what you're fixing to witness now is the man who came by to get King to take him to dinner. And 30 years later at a press conference, he slipped because God do baffle your mind sometimes. You look, some of the activities
geared especially for the young who did not have a chance to get to feel or to know what the civil rights movement actually was about. Even as they marched, now they could have stopped in a hotel, but when you think about marching from Memphis to Jackson or Jackson to Memphis, there were no hotels. You stayed in churches, you stayed in people's homes, and that's how we got over, that's how we got through. The struggle was a spiritual struggle. You couldn't pay people to do what we had to do. You couldn't pay people to stand before mad dogs and fire hoses and billy clubs and cattle prods. It was strictly a spiritual and moral movement. So we wanted that dimension to be in the pilgrimage to Memphis. We will revisit the mountaintop speech site. That's the Mason's Temple, where Dr. King made his last address, which he almost didn't make, because the night that we were having that rally, there were tornado warnings, and he was behind on the Poor People's Campaign. And he said, you guys go on over and have the rally. I'm going to stay at the motel and work on the Poor People's Campaign. When we got there and Dr. Abernathy walked in and Jesse Jackson walked in and I walked in and others, people started clapping because they thought Martin was behind us. And so Ralph's preacher sense said to him, this is not our crowd. And he went to the phone and called Dr. King. And any of the marches that we had in those days, you have an opportunity to bring the children and bring the family and march with us. And when I finished sharing with them the last hour of Dr. King's life, a hurry, but that gave me the wonderful privilege of spending the last hour on earth. 3 preachers in a room, Abernathy, King, and Kyle. And we spent that last hour together in room 306 at the Lorraine Motel. The press is always curious, and writers, what went on? What did you talk about? I say, we just talk preacher talk. What preachers talk about when they get together.
Y'all pay real attention to what you're fixing to hear now.
About 5:45, we walked on the balcony, and he was talking to people in the courtyard. He stood here and I stood there. Only as I moved away, so we could have a clear shot, the shot rang out.
Thank you.
I turned around and then knocked him back on the balcony.
Listen. Wait, listen. Listen. 30 years later, this brother never realized he would slip and say that. Do you know what happened when you're sitting in a jury room about a conspiracy and this piece of film is introduced? He stood here, I stood here, only as I moved away so he could have a clear shot. The shot rang out. Hey. This was the brother that he was going by his house for dinner. Now, to my brother Malik, you will have a copy of this tape. I'll get it back to you. And what you should do is make copies. See to it, because this is a very valuable. And y'all need to send this tape to people all over this country. And so this was the trial that went on that the press didn't want to report because they couldn't. Huh? They couldn't. And so we have to stop getting mad and upset because the same system that's killing us refused to tell us the truth. You have to use your own God-given intelligence. If we was all over in Germany today walking down the street and we see this big old building and it's named after Adolf Hitler, you don't have to be too smart to realize something evil is going on inside that building. How come you don't understand that when you walk down in Washington, D.C. and see that big old brand new FBI building named after J. Edgar Hoover? How come we don't know something evil is going on inside that building? Let me briefly tell you some of the things that you overheard. The trial should have lasted a day and a half. It lasted 30 days. The black press in Memphis didn't even show up. Let me tell you how this trial came about. About 6 years ago, a white man named Lloyd Jarvis, who probably, now this is just my philosophy, who probably was told they're fixing to blame the King murders on you. So he went to ABC, and they did a whole session with him, telling them how he was involved and what the conspiracy and who it was. And then they never ran it. And so now he's running for his life. So he goes to the King family, and he tells them the same thing that he told ABC. He tells them 3 times, and the 4th time, Andy Young. And they filmed it, they taped it. And he said, I was given $100,000 by Frank Liberto, who was the mafia puppet who ran Memphis for the big mafia boys out of New Orleans. So it was Frank Liberto, he said, that gave him $100,000 to set up the whole mechanism for killing King. In the building right behind the Lorraine Hotel with the courtyard bumped into, Lord Jarvis had a restaurant called Jim's Grill. He also said that at the first meeting, here's who was there, so-and-so was there, so-and-so was there, and let me tell you, there was some black folks there too.
Free at last, free at last, thank God Almighty, we are free at last.
After Dr. King gave his famous March on Washington speech, Wednesday, August 28, 1963, in a memo dated the 30th of August, no later than that, the second person in the FBI, it may have been Sullivan, sends an urgent memo in which he says, after the March on Washington, it's clear that Martin Luther King Jr. is the most dangerous Negro in America. And we have to use every resource at our disposal to destroy him.
Now you can get the same uncompromising truth you've come to expect from the Final Call newspaper on all your connected devices. Subscribe to the Final Call digital edition today. Go to subscribe.finalcalldigital.com.
Greetings, dear listeners. We have been blessed by Almighty God Allah over the 90 years of our work in the Nation of Islam and lifting our people up from the miserable condition in which we find ourselves. We ask your support of our effort, and we hope that you will be generous and make a contribution to the work of the Nation of Islam and the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan by clicking the button below or go to noi.org/donate. We thank you in advance for your support. May Allah God continue to bless you and your families. Assalamu alaikum.